In Genshin Impact, everyone focuses on the 5 stars as the main form of FOMO, or fear of missing out. But what if I told you that it's actually the 4 stars that have the same or even greater potential of pushing FOMO? Let me explain, but first, I need you to understand that I'm going to explain a lot of the basic concepts of Genshin because a lot of people play the game casually and they may not even care about half of the mechanics I will try to explain. So if you actually understand how the game works, please bear with me because I originally just wanted to talk about it without a script, but it leaves holes for those unaware of the game mechanics that I will mention. So yeah, let's actually start. Dedicated 4-star supports in Genshin is a fairly novel concept introduced in around version 2.1 with the release of the Raiden Shogun and Gujo Sara. Electro at the time was mistakenly thought of as the weakest element, so Sara was meant to be the support for Raiden, using her elemental skill that deploys a crow feather that increases the attack of the characters based on Sara's own base attack when the crow feather detonates, or through using her elemental burst, which applies the same attack buff. This is not unlike Bennett, who also increases the base attack of allies who are in the field of his elemental burst. So this hypothetically made Raiden and Sara an incredible pairing without needing to slot Bennett in a Raiden hyper carry team. Unfortunately, Sara was far too clunky when buffing Raiden because the main way of applying her attack buff was to press her elemental skill, hold her aim shot towards the ground, fire and swap, then use Raiden's elemental burst buffed with Sara. It doesn't sound clunky, but it does require a full second of aiming at the ground and waiting, while Sara does not have any way of protecting herself from interruption or to prevent being hit, because being hit means you have to prepare a 1 second aim shot once again. So, how do you keep Sara from being interrupted? Well, you can use her elemental burst as it applies Sara's attack buff when the character near the AoE area of effect of the lightning bolts that come down. But another problem appears when the energy cost of Sara is 80, which is the second highest energy cost under 90. In order to understand how heavy of a cost an 80 energy burst is, we need to dive into how energy is gained in Genshin Impact. The most common ways of gaining energy in Genshin Impact are generating elemental particles when elemental skills hit an enemy, or when the health of enemies are reduced to a certain threshold, but we will only talk about generating energy through skills, and of course, there are exceptions, but we don't need to worry about it right now. Energy generated from elemental skills are small orbs, usually with the same elemental typing as the character whose elemental skills were used. For example, if Kamisato Ayaka landed her elemental skill, cryo particles would be generated as Ayaka is a cryo element user. If Bennett lands his elemental skill, he will generate pyro particles as he is a pyro element character. Because different elemental particles exist, the energy restored will depend on whether the active character who collects the energy particle is of the same or different element as the particle. If a cryo character like Aika collects a cryo energy particle, it will restore 3 energy, but collecting an elemental particle that is not cryo, such as pyro, hydro, electro, animo, dendro, and geo, Aika will be restored 1 energy. This assumes Aika has an energy recharge stat of 100%. Of course, there are other variables such as inactive characters getting a portion of the energy restored, but that is not the focus right now. And if you want to see it, here it is, or see the table in the Genshin Impact wiki for the original table and potentially for more information. Back to Sara, she generates 3 electro particles when landing her crow feather after a fully charged aim shot after using her elemental skill, which gives a total of 9 energy, as 1 particle of the same element gives 3 energy. Assuming Sara is the active character who collects the electro particles, which restores about 11% of her elemental burst, assuming 100% energy recharge, you will need to use her elemental skill for a total of 9 times to fully charge her elemental burst. Accounting for cooldown, Sara by herself will require 90 seconds to fully recharge her burst, but Genshin has rotations that usually takes at most 20 seconds. 90 seconds to recharge your elemental burst will be far too long, so we will use energy recharge, or the ER stat for short, to reduce the energy costs. ER is the modifier that affects how much energy is restored through particles only. It does not affect flat energy generated for some skills unless there is a specified way to increase the flat and energy generated. In a normal situation, an 80 cost character like Sarah would need around 300% energy recharge to use her elemental burst often, but it is dropped to around 200 to 240% from Raiden's ability to restore team energy, and will drop even lower through electro resonance, which generates an electro particle when an electro reaction is triggered once every second, and depending on how much additional particles the team can generate, it can go even lower. So why did I go on a lesson on energy generation? It's because this is where other dedicated 4-star supports are purposely lacking in. Goro and Farazan are also 80 energy cost supports, but the hyper carries they support do not generate the same energy that Raiden does, nor do they have their own version of electro resonance to generate additional energy. Energy issues are further exacerbated when Goro and Farazan generate 2 elemental particles. The most common way of building these characters is to equip a Favonius weapon series, which generates 3 white particles that, depending on the environment, will generate energy, and to have 300% energy recharge on both, which may not be enough depending on the team's particle generation. But it goes even deeper because MiHoYo made the problem, so they decided to sell you the solution through constellations. Constellations are a bonus to the character when getting a duplicate. C0 is when you have only pulled a single copy of a character, C1 is when you pull 2 copies, and so on. C6 or 7 copies of a character is the maximum number of copies for a character to be at full strength while not counting their signature weapon. This ploy is apparent as in the 2.1 beta, Sara's original C1 is now her Ascension stat, which, when using her elemental skill, her next aimed shot charge time is reduced by 60%, meaning Sara originally, if you did not have C1, you would have to hold Sara's aim shot for more than 2.5 seconds. Sara is already clunky with only 1 second of charge time, but 2.5 seconds plus is insanity. But because you need one other copy, you would think that's fine in your head, so you go ahead and try to pull another copy, but it doesn't stop there. Sara C2 leaves a crow feather when she uses her elemental skill, but it's useful and strong because it applies the same attack buff that using her aim shot does, so you are no longer required to use aim shots. Then there's C5, which increases the level of her elemental skill by 3, which is a 17% increase in the attack buff it provides, but because you're already at C5, you think just go for C6 because being buffed by Sarah at C6 gives a 60% bonus crit damage on electro damage of the characters who are buffed by Sarah. Goro, funny enough, doesn't really do anything game changing until C6. Oh, but you're probably going to mention C4 healing. My brother in Christ, if you're running Geo without Zhongli, you might as well be playing another comp. Goro's C6 increases the Geo crit damage of party members near the area Goro sets up with his elemental skill and burst with a 10, 20, 40% crit damage, Geo crit damage, I believe, when 1, 2, 3 Geo party members are in the party respectively. Faruzan is built incorrectly. She plays exactly like Sara, except that it is mandatory that you use her elemental burst, forcing a 300% ER stat on her at C0. So, how do you solve her energy problems? Well, C6, C4, and C2. But first, you need to understand what C6 does and her kit first. Faruzan's elemental skill deals damage to nearby enemies, and her next fully charged aim shot will be a hurricane arrow that gathers nearby enemies. Faruzan's elemental burst deploys a polyhedron that moves in a triangle, and reaching a corner of said triangle will unleash a pulse that reduces the animal resistance of enemies and an animal damage bonus called Prayerful Wind's Benefit. Now with C6, It gives a 40% crit damage when an anemo damage is dealt, and when the active character with Prayerful Wind deals damage, the effect of Farazan's Hurricane Arrow will be applied with a 3-second cooldown. C4 restores flat 2 energy for one opponent, and additional opponent's hit will generate half or 0.5 energy with a cap of 4 energy per vortex, or yeah. But it also has the additional effect of gathering enemies multiple times. C2 increases the duration of her elemental burst by 6 seconds for a total uptime of 18 seconds. Assuming 3 enemies are in the field for the full duration, Farazan generates 3 energy for a total of 18 flat energy, drastically reducing her energy costs to 62 missing energy, which is much more manageable than the full 80 cost burst. Now that we understand how MeiHoYo solves the characters of an issue through constellations, how hard is it to get copies of a 4-star character? At face value, not very difficult, because once every 10 wishes guarantees a 4-star drop, unlike a 5-star, which requires 180 wishes if you are very unlucky, but the featured 5-star is guaranteed within 180 wishes. However, 4-stars that you want are actually more difficult than 5-stars. So let me explain what happens when you try to wish for a 4-star. Assuming that you have not wished in a character banner or your previous 4-star was a rate of 4-star, you are secretly in a 50-50 situation where your next star, 4-star, is either a rate up or a non-rate up 4-star. If you lose the 50-50 and get a non-rate up character, you get a random 4-star character or weapon. But if your next 4-star is a rate up 4-star character, so you pull for another 10 times and you are guaranteed a rate up character, except you're not guaranteed a specific rate of 4-star. So you have to essentially win a 33% chance of getting the rate up character you want 7 times. If Goro, Yanfei, and Faruzan are the 4-star rate ups, you have an equal chance of getting one of those 3, and you have no influence in getting a better chance for Faruzan. This is the same issue that the old weapon banner had, where you could be eternally stuck in winning a 50-50 for the rate up weapons and no guarantee. But in this case, it's a 33% out of a 66% of 33% of course winning and 66% of like losing, and also no guarantee. There is even one person with C6 Scaramouche and C3 Ito without C6 Faruzan. With how 4-star kit designs are being gutted only to be fixed by wishing for more copies, this makes MeiHoYo incentivized not to make 5-star supports, but instead 4-star supports that you need constellations for, because the norm for 5-star and 4-star characters are that you don't get constellation for 5-star characters, but you definitely should for 4-stars, which makes it a very dangerous precedent to only get 4-star constellations, because think about it like this. It is very hard to sell a dedicated 4-star support such as Shenhe, but not a staple like Kazuha. Most people will realistically not pull for Shenhe because she will be benched when you are not using a cryo-based team. Kazuha will not be benched, but because Kazuha is a staple, it becomes hard to justify getting another support without direct power creep, and the only way to do that is through a character like Venti. Venti doesn't outright buff team damage through stats, but through the efficiency of dealing damage from grouped enemies and Viridescent Venom application from his anemo typing. There's also Nahida with her immense Dendro application and off-field damage through her Trikarma mark and Dendro reactions. But even then, you would at least, at most, pull one copy of Kazuha, Nahida, Venti basically every 5-star. While a notable amount of 5-stars have insane power spikes at C2, it's very hard to sell that, but a C6 4-star is much easier to convince people to pull for. Compounding with the precedent that you should pull for 4-star constellations, why wouldn't MeiHoYo purposely create kit issues like energy recharge problems and clunkiness at C0, but fix the issues while adding bonus utility on C6 to further tempt you to pull for 7 copies when you are already going to? It's like Apple removing the headphone jack only to sell you AirPods. Create a problem, sell the solution, profit. It's also very worrying to have a support that is tailor-made for a certain type of character because of 2 reasons. One, the supported character's kit is purposely made weaker on the guys that they have a dedicated support, and 2, bringing said dedicated support reduces team slots for flexibility. Faruzan for Anemo hypercarries, for example, limits team comps because in order to run Scaramouche or Xiao, you're forced to run Farzan with them and be stuck with two characters slots open to fill for defensive or utility roles. You could drop Farzan for better team flexibility, but reduce the strength of Scaramouche or Xiao. It leaves both of them or any other characters with a dedicated support in a much weaker state by themselves. So yeah, that's everything on why 4-star supports are and have the potential to be used as a tool to force you to spend more, as MiHoYo is not afraid to create problems for you to fix by wishing more, and pulling for 4 stars are far worse than 5-star rates, as 4 stars do not have a guarantee, with you having to win a 33% chance of a character and 66% chance of you getting a character that you don't want. And even that's with you being guaranteed for a rate up. There's also times where you may lose the secret 50-50 and may get like, I don't know, like some random weapon or character. But with the community precedent of pulling for 4-star constellations only, you are fooled into thinking that the constellations are a bonus to fixing an issue that MiHoYo themselves have created. The supported characters are also weakened through the reason that they have dedicated this support to help them out, but without said support, the supported characters will have a noticeable drop in strength. And that's everything. Again, I could have ranted about this issue, but again, you need to understand the basics, and some don't really care, and explaining the basics helps with understanding why certain qualities are outright predatory. Although the secret reason was to prove that I actually understand the game, because a certain someone, yeah, you know who you are. Basically, you called me a brain dead meta slave, that I don't understand the game because I rely on the meta. Yeah, sure, bro. Faker's one of the best League of Legends players because he's a meta sheep and plays the strongest characters. Yeah, I'm a spiteful fuck.